Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you for taking the time to check out today's live stream, where, of course, we're going to be going over understanding recovery as the real growth phase. So, of course, before I do get started with going over the topic, I do want to mention my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. Again, it stays updated pretty often. You can check out a ton of information on there as it relates to online fitness coaching. There's a ton of free resources as well on there. I always keep it updated as far as my fitness blog. And you can also check out information that pertains to, different subjects. I usually upload a my latest live stream. So anytime I do a Facebook live stream, usually it's on the homepage on my website. You can actually, when you're on Facebook, and if you do follow me, um, you can actually sign up, of course, on my profile to do online fitness coaching. But if you do want the link to the website, feel free to let me know. I thought I had it on. It is actually, my website is on my profile. So if you go to my, details on my profile, you can go directly to my website. It's bponlinefitness.com. I want to make sure that I had it so that you guys would know that you can access it there. Um, so another thing too is that I do want to, preface too that every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, I do TikTok live streams. So if you're interested in that as well, you can check that out. My link on there is at Brandon SP Fit. And I also do an X Spaces discussion. However, I won't be doing that because normally I do those on Thursdays, but I won't be doing that tomorrow. So if you're interested in that, feel free to let me know. Um, but with all that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get started with talking about this topic for the day, which is on understanding recovery as the real growth phase. So, there are many different things that I'm going to go over today, and we're going to primarily, of course, discuss recovery. Now, when we're talking about recovery, if you've listened to any of the previous streams that I've done, I always mention there's basically three different pillars that you have to think about when it comes to your workout routine. And that, of course, is your fitness, your nutrition, and your recovery. And the reason why you need to think about all of these is that when you have all of these different points balanced together, that's going to help you get the results that you're wanting in your routine. So, of course, you need to think about, you know, recovery as one of those pillars to really balance in your workout routine. So, the first thing we need to think about, of course, is why recovery builds muscle more than training. We're also going to discuss a deep dive into muscle protein synthesis, sleep architecture, nervous system recovery, nutrition timing for recovery, stress management as a muscle building multiplier, and the power of active recovery. So, these are all the points that we're going to be discussing today in this stream. And again, guys, all of this is free for you to access. I give this information out to give you guys, something that you can take with you, something that you can learn and take advantage of. Um, but again, guys, if you do have further questions, anything I discuss here today, feel free to let me know. So, the first thing we want to think about, of course, is why recovery builds more outside of just our workout routine in general. So, growth actually happens more after the workout. So, training helps to break down those muscle fibers, and recovery is when they repair and come back stronger. So, when you don't have recovery, that's going to lead to stalled growth in your workout routine. Muscle protein synthesis also peaks at rest. So, what that means is that your body is going to rebuild best during deep sleep. And we're going to again discuss about sleep architecture and what deep sleep is so you have a better understanding of that. But basically, of course, deep sleep is a part of that sleep architecture. And then, of course, having low rest periods is going to help as well to sort of rebuild. So, this is where your real gains happen. Hormones also reset and rebuild. Quality recovery boosts testosterone. Growth hormone and lowers cortisol, creating the perfect anabolic environment. So, if you understand or you hear me talk a ton about rest and recovery over and over again, um, that it's crucial. You need to have it in your routine in order for you to really have that muscle growth and repair. So, another thing too to keep in mind is that it's going to lead to a nervous system recharge. So you're going to have stronger lifts in your routine. So your central nervous system, that's your CNS, that's the central nervous system, it needs downtime, and it's a recovered system that's going to fire harder and stabilize better, and it's going to unlock heavier, more efficient reps in your routine. So keep that in mind. So the next point I want to mention here is on a deep dive into muscle protein synthesis. So, muscle protein synthesis is something I've discussed time and time again. I've discussed it over and over again, but it's still something that's really crucial to understand and to get a grasp on. So, what is MPS or muscle protein synthesis? So, this is where your body's processing or repairing and rebuilding those muscle fibers after training. If you heard me talk about muscle protein synthesis in particular, one thing I always mention is that it's good to have, sufficient amount of protein in your system to really help to aid in that muscle repair and growth. So, training itself, of course, is creating the stimulus, and MPS is basically the construction crew that's helping to grow that muscle. And of course, again, the way that you really help with that muscle protein synthesis process is having, sufficient protein, having, a good sort of recovery regimen, and just, having that good routine is going to help. So the trigger, of course, is mechanical tension plus fatigue. So heavy loads, controlled tempo, and stretch under load, and metabolic fatigue are going to activate cellular pathways that signal MPS to begin. Now, I know that all of that sounds a little confusing, but what we're talking about here is that when we combine heavy loads, which means we're lifting heavy weights, we're controlling our tempo, which means how we, control the reps that we perform in our workouts, as well as how long we, stretch that muscle in our workouts. So this is what's leading to that metabolic fatigue, which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it's going to activate more of those cellular pathways that leads to that muscle protein synthesis. So the fuel is, of course, amino acids. This is especially important when it comes to leucine. Leucine is usually found a lot of times in various different supplements. And like creatine, usually you would find leucine. But and also of course protein itself because it does kind of derive from protein. So it's a protein rich, and leucine is going to turn on that anabolic switch, which is again going to aid more in that muscle repair and growth. So what you need to do is aim for 25 to 35 grams of high quality protein per meal to maximize muscle protein synthesis. So the window to keep in mind. So cycle every 3 to 4 hours. Muscle protein synthesis spikes after training, and every time you eat enough protein, proper spacing ensures repeated growth throughout the day. So one thing I've always mentioned when it comes to especially this aspect of muscle protein synthesis is the concept of basically spreading out your protein intake throughout the day. So and I discussed this too on TikTok where when you spread your intake throughout the day, like, in your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner, it's going to help, keep the protein in your system, and that's what's going to help with that muscle growth and that muscle repair process. So that's what you need to keep in mind when it comes to muscle protein synthesis. So as we continue on here, the next point I want to go over is sleep architecture. And sleep architecture is what we're going over here is basically the different phases that you will go through throughout your, overnight sleep. I've mentioned this before, and the way that you can sort of measure your sleep, of course, is if you use like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. I always measure my sleep each night. You've probably seen me post about my sleep. I'm pretty kind of really strict on my sleep, I guess you could say. So, that's a way that you can sort of identify sleep a little bit better. So there's basically three different phases that you're going to go through, of course, outside of being awake. So you have your first phase, which is your light sleep. This is your sort of transition phase, and you'll go through light sleep pretty often. And what this is it usually lasts for roughly 1 to 7 minutes. This is where your muscles relax, your heart rate sort of slows down, and makes up 50% of your total sleep. So if you do track your sleep, yeah, I do recommend anybody to do it because I think it's helpful. An Apple Watch, I've used it for a while. I've been tracking it since I bought a new Apple Watch, and I think it's really accurate. It'll pretty much lay out your sleep pretty clearly. And one thing I always know, whether it's sort of, doing the right thing, is like if I have a dream that night, I'll if I see that REM sleep phase, then I know it's pretty much where it should be. So again, this makes up 50% of your total sleep. Your body temperature is going to drop. Your breathing and heart rate are going to stabilize in this light sleep phase. So again, like I mentioned with the dreams, your REM, your rapid eye movement, this is where dreams happen. Anytime you have a dream, and when you like track your sleep, you'll notice, that certain amount of time, that's where you know that you've had a dream. And that's where your brain is sort of making all of these, it's like really active. That's the way we're able to have, visualize dreams is our brain in that process is being really active. So deep sleep itself is the most restorative stage when it comes to especially like when we're talking about the muscle growth process. This is something that I look at all the time when I track my sleep because this is the stage where you're going to really identify, if you're getting really good quality sleep. And the more you have deep sleep in your, sleep stages, the more you're going to have better muscle growth and repair. So growth hormone usually peaks in this particular stage. Now, I would love to show you guys, sort of breaking down sleep architecture a little bit better and show you guys an example of mine. My sleep's kind of been up and down here recently, so I don't think I want to show it right now. But sleep, like I think last night, I think I had roughly 20 to 30 minutes of deep sleep, which is pretty decent. That's a pretty good, that's again where a lot of repair happens with your muscles. And especially like if you're working out consistently, like I work out, 5 days a week pretty much. And again, you don't have to do that, but that's, the routine that I've sort of built. And from there, I've, built this really structured routine where everything, it just kind of falls into place for me. So just know that these are all the stages that you'll go through. And again, the way you can track that, of course, is if you have any of those fitness trackers. So the nervous system recovery. So the nervous system is a big part of the recovery and repair process in your body. And what you need to be aware of is that this is another system you need to think about when you're approaching, your workouts and your exercises. So most people think a lot of times that strength comes from muscle, but muscles don't lift weight. Your nervous system tells them to. So if you've ever had a day where everything feels heavy for no reason, or a session where your coordination is off, that's not muscle fatigue, that's nervous system fatigue. So there's two different things you need to understand when it comes to fatigue. When you're performing workouts, the most common sort of fatigue that you're going to feel, of course, is muscle fatigue. This is soreness, this is tightness in the muscles, this is any localized fatigue that you're going to have, and you can usually push through this type of fatigue. And this is going to usually recover in 24 to 72 hours. So this does kind of range. There is a concept that I mentioned before that's known as delayed onset muscle soreness. And basically what that is the muscle soreness that happens post workout. And that's where you're going to have sort of that muscle fatigue sort of phase. So CNS, of course, that's your central nervous system. This is the fatigue where you're noticing that fatigue in your central nervous system. So when you notice that, it's totally different than when you're feeling muscle fatigue itself. So what you're going to feel is a more whole body exhaustion from this type of fatigue. So you're going to have actually slow reaction times. You're going to have more trouble, like difficulty generating force, and heavy weights are going to feel even heavier when you have this central nervous system fatigue. And again, guys, if anything is, unclear here, let me know. But that's how you're going to really identify whether you have these two different types of fatigue, and whether, you need to think about how you assess your recovery. So, as we continue on here, the next point I want to go over, of course, is nutrition timing for recovery. So, like I mentioned, again, your three pillars that you want to think about, with any workout routine is, of course, your nutrition, your workouts themselves, as well as your recovery. So, nutrition timing is a very important thing. I did touch on it just a moment ago when I talked about protein, but I want to expand on it a little bit more and sort of explain the difference between your intake pre and post workout. So, most people again think strength comes from only the muscles themselves, but muscles don't lift weight, your nervous system tells them to. So, again, you kind of repeated there from the last slide. But when we're talking about nutrient topping, sometimes with these slides I get so mixed up. But anyways, the information is here on screen. So pre-workout, so there's two different things you need to think about. So pre-workout is what's priming your system. And when you think of pre-workout, this is, you mostly want to think of anything that's going to be like helping with energy and really helping to protect those muscles as you're performing workouts. So, timing 45 to 90 minutes before training is really going to help with, giving your body what it needs to get through the workout. So, you want to focus on roughly 20 to 30 grams of protein, 20 to 60 grams of carbs, low fats. And when you think of fats, you do want to think of healthy fats themselves. Healthy fats are going to be olive oil, avocados, and anything to that effect is going to be, more of your healthy fats. So this is going to support strength, it's going to reduce fatigue and keep the muscles fueled. Now, when we're talking about post-workout, nutrition, what you need to think about is feeding the repair cycle. So the goal is to refill energy and kickstarting the rebuilding phase of your workouts. One thing I always really focus on a ton is my post-workout nutrition. And of course, you would want to think of post-workout nutrition more because you're thinking of, the top of, helping to repair those muscles. That's what you're thinking of in post-workout nutrition. So Again, you want to sort of have this within 1 to 3 hours. You want to focus on 20 to 40 grams of protein, 20 to 60 grams of carbs. Again, this is healthy carbs. This is your complex based carbs, brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat based options. And this is going to restore glycogen. Glycogen is basically an energy source in the body. This is also going to help reduce muscle soreness, and it's going to boost that muscle protein synthesis process at the same time. So you really do need to emphasize, if you're really wanting to think about that muscle protein synthesis and repair, you do really want to emphasize that post-workout sort of recovery. So, or post-workout nutrition, I should say. So the next point we want to think about here is stress management as a muscle building multiplier. So stress is a big thing we really need to assess if we're wanting to make sure that we are able to get to our goals more efficiently. And I know that this can be a hard thing to manage because we all kind of have different things that we go through in life, and it can be very difficult to manage your stress. So, your body can't build muscle effectively or efficiently, I should say, when it's stuck in survival mode. So, when you have high stress in your body, this is what sort of elevates cortisol, which again is a stress hormone. If you lack a lot of sleep, this is oftentimes going to be higher. Your cortisol levels will go up if you do, have that sort of less sleep, I should say. If you have less sleep, there's going to be a higher cortisol level there. So when we're talking about, again, high stress, elevating cortisol, it's going to disrupt that recovery process. It's lowering your sleep quality. So your sleep stages are going to, differ from when you would have a very healthy sort of sleep pattern. So, like I mentioned with sleep architecture, when you're breaking those apart, you likely won't have a lot of deep sleep, phase, like a long deep sleep phase in there because you're not getting that muscle repair. So, just think about that as well. And it's also going to reduce your training performance when you don't have proper stress management. So, managing stress isn't optional, it's a growth catalyst. So, you have to really think about, finding ways to alleviate stress. So, chronic stress can actually slow muscle repair. So, the lower your stress, the better you're going to be for recovery. It's also going to increase inflammation and soreness in the body. So this is again another thing that can delay your the muscle growth process if you're not getting proper sort of rest in your routine. Stress also impacts hormone balance. So higher cortisol competes with anabolic hormones. So of course for men, the big thing that a lot of men of course think about is testosterone production. And this is really going to help with, managing that testosterone production in the body when you are able to sort of manage those stress levels. The more stress you have, it's going to sort of affect that. And like I mentioned, going back to nutrition, those healthy fats, like I mentioned with nutrition, are going to help a ton with that hormone production. That does help, like I mentioned, healthy fats, that helps a ton with those hormone production. So when you combine, that the stress impact as far as like your hormone balance along with having good nutrition, it does really make a better impact on your recovery. So I just wanted to sort of combine those there. Stress also affects, of course, your sleep architecture, which I just, sort of mentioned. So you're going to have those, that poor sleep that's going to disrupt your REM, or again, your rapid eye movement and your deep sleep phases. So when you have a shorter amount of the REM in the deep sleep phases, this is going to affect your recovery in a more negative way. So this is going to also reduce growth hormone release as well, which again is helping with that muscle building and hypertrophy. So, the power of active recovery. Active recovery is another thing you need to think about. This is something that I mention time and time again with clients that when you approach your workout routine, this is a crucial thing to include. Active recovery in itself helps to really be able to keep your body moving while also giving your body rest. That's sort of the concept of active recovery. So active recovery itself is basically like you're having a rest day, but in that rest day you're basically performing lighter movement. So, active recovery isn't light exercise, it's a strategic tool that's speeding up muscle repair, reducing soreness, and boosts long term progress. So, it keeps your body primed for your training session. So, yes, you are performing, more, not as many structured movements. You're not really performing structured workout per se, but you're using this sort of phase to be able to actually help with, again, your muscle training, your weightlifting process. So what this does, and again, think of active recovery again like having a light cardio on your rest days, as well as also including, you know, some stretching, mobility based sort of stretching, foam roller stretching, anything to that effect. So this is going to boost circulation and nutrient delivery. This is also going to enhance blood flow in the body. It's going to deliver more oxygen and amino acids and nutrients to the muscle tissues themselves. And at the same time, it's also going to help clear those metabolic byproducts, which again is going to aid in muscle repair. It also, of course, is restoring mobility and reduce stiffness. So, like I mentioned, when you think of, mobility, reducing stiffness, that's like when you're doing foam rolling, stretching, those static stretches where you're holding the position for 30 seconds. Again, that keeps joints moving smoothly, maintains flexibility and tissue quality, and it's also preventing tightness that can affect form. It also, of course, supports the nervous system. So, gentle movement in itself calms the body. It's going to reduce those stress hormones, like we talked about in the previous slide, and it's going to improve recovery of the central nervous system after training. So you need to think about that as well, that including those active recovery days in your rest is really important. So I was thinking there was another slide after that, but that's pretty much all we got. I could have kept going, but thank you guys once again for watching. I hope that you found this helpful and valuable. And again, guys, if you have any questions on anything I've discussed here today, if you're unsure on, anything that I've discussed, feel free to let me know, even if it's something previously, like a video I've done before, or if it's, anything else that I've shared. Feel free to let me know if you have questions on any of that. Again, guys, my website is bponlinefitness.com. There's a ton of information on there related to online fitness coaching. There is a free fitness blog that you can check out there. I also have an email list that you can sign up to when you go to my website. On that email list, you can find out a ton of information as it relates to online fitness coaching and so much more stuff. I'm trying to really add to that so you guys have more information. I also have added a section on my website where you can go directly to my Instagram. It'll show some of my latest posts from my Instagram on there, so you can check that out as well. So again, guys, check that out. If you guys have any questions on anything I've discussed, let me know. But again, guys, I'll have another stream next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, where I'll be discussing a new topic. I'll have that event up pretty soon where you can RSVP to that. But once again, guys, I really appreciate your time, and I really hope that this can really help you think about recovery and how to properly integrate recovery in your workout routine. So thank you guys once again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.